There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So good morning from where I'm at. I'm in northern Illinois right now, and it's more like January here than November. It's not snowing right now, but it's really cold and windy. Um, so I'm in a nice warm spare bedroom here that my husband uses as a home office. And I just wanted to share something lighthearted and fun with everybody this morning. One of the things that I always love to do is I love to get book recommendations from people. So I'm always asking people what's a good book to read. And I'm always reading more than one book at a time. Right now, I'm actually reading 4 books. It's kind of hard to read multiple books at once, but I can't just read one at a time. And I thought, well, maybe I'll turn around and I'll share some of my favorite books with people who also might be book lovers as well. So before I get talking here, I'm going to drop a link in the chat here. This is a spreadsheet I put together of all the books I'm going to mention. And what I tried to do on the spreadsheet is I tried to put just, the name and the author. I included an Amazon link. And then I tried to let you know if it was fiction or nonfiction, and then maybe some topics. That way you might be able to filter out some of these books maybe that aren't of interest to you and focus only on the ones that are. I also included my summary. I didn't go and get like the official book summaries. I tried to include mine along with any insights that I may have had. So without further ado, let me share some of these books with you. I was hoping I would actually have physical books to show you, but some of these books I've read like the hard copy, and some of them I read on my Kindle, so I don't have physical hard copies for all of them. So I dropped them in this little template here to share with you. So these are not in any particular order. These are just books that, as I was thinking about what are the favorite books I've read, these are the ones that came to me in the order of my mind. So this isn't a rank order of any sort. And hopefully I'll get through them all. If not, that's okay. You've got the spreadsheet with the links and the summaries. So the first book I want to share is called The Measure. I actually just finished this book a few weeks ago. And the premise of the book is one morning, everybody wakes up, everybody in the whole world wakes up, and they have a box in front of their door, or even if they're homeless, it's like where they are. And if you open the box, inside you find a string, and the length of the string coincides to the length of your life. And so some people have really long strings, some people have very short strings, some people don't open the box right away, some people do. And while on the surface it seems like this book might be about, do we want to know how long our life is going to last? It actually goes really far beyond that question and shows how society, and actually global society, is impacted, how politics and how relationships and how medicine and how everything in society is impacted by every person having access to kind of knowing how long their life might last. So it was a much more interesting book than I thought it was going to be. I just thought it would be a fun little story about, if you knew how long your life would last, would you want to know? And it ended up being a lot more deep than that. So a really fascinating read. Another book I recently read that I admit is a bit of a downer. It's called Sandy Hook, An American Tragedy and the Battle for Truth. And the book starts out with a lot of information from the families of the Sandy Hook victims, outlining what happened that day at Sandy Hook Elementary School. It is very, very difficult to get through. And then the author goes into talking about the conspiracy theories that swirled around this particular school shooting, and how conspiracy theories get started, in particular, how this particular conspiracy theory got started. And it ended up being a really fascinating look at the kinds of people that buy into conspiracy theories and why they behave the way they do, especially in this particular situation. So it's admittedly a pretty tough read, but it was very interesting to take a look at. So that's a nonfiction book if you're interested in nonfiction. Another nonfiction book that I really enjoyed was this book called Fierce Conversations. I actually read this at work. Our school district's admin team, every year we do a book study. And a couple of years ago, this particular book was our book study. And what I really liked about this book is it talked about how to be a really clear communicator, but also how to receive communications from people, especially when it comes to having difficult conversations. So if you have wanted to find a book about how to really up your communication game, and then also how to be a good receiver of information, especially if it's difficult, if you're in a leadership role, this is a book I highly recommend. It's a really easy read, and it's very practical, and you'll find yourself wanting to actually have some fierce conversations with people after reading it. The next book on my list here is called Kindred, and I actually just found out yesterday that this book is being turned into a series, I believe, that's going to be premiering on Hulu in December. So in this book, the main character finds herself being taken out of her current life and transported into pre-Civil War time, where she actually gets to meet some of her ancestors and gets to live the life of what it's like to be a slave during that time. It's a really interesting take on historical fiction, not the kind of historical fiction I've ever read before. And it's actually, in a way, kind of a very scary book. What the main character goes through when she is time traveling is actually quite frightening. So it was one of those page turners that you just can't put down. I think I read this book in like 3 days. I just couldn't put it down. I was upset when work got in the way of reading my book. So Kindred is another one I recommend. And like I said, it's about to become a series on Hulu next month. The next book I'm going to recommend is another nonfiction book. It's called Sidelined. And an interesting little side note, it is written by Julie DeCaro. And Julie DeCaro is a sports journalist here in the Chicago area. And Julie DeCaro has been very outspoken about her own experiences being a journalist. She's actually a lawyer by trade. That's how she started her career. She's a lawyer and eventually turned to sports journalism. She's also been very candid about the fact that she's experienced sexual assault, and she talks a lot about the harassment that she receives as a female in sports journalism. And she finally decided to turn this into a book. And she interviewed all sorts of other women who work in sports journalism and talked with them about their treatment. And it's kind of a depressing look at the way women are treated, especially in the sports world. But a very interesting read for sure. So I recommend that book as well. My dog has been silent all morning, and now she decides she has to bark. Sorry if you can hear her back there. Another book I want to recommend is called A Long Way Home. If you saw the movie Lion that Dev Patel was in, this is actually the book that movie was based on. This book is written by Saru Brierley, who shared the story of how he was lost as a 5-year-old boy in his country of India, and the things that he had to endure as he was lost as a young boy are amazing. That he came out of it alive is incredible. And he is eventually adopted, And as an adult, he decides to try to find his family and understand his history. And after I saw the movie, I was so moved by the movie, I decided to read the book. And the book is even more emotionally involving than the book is more involved than the movie. So if you've seen the movie, I highly, highly recommend the book. It is a fascinating tale that he tells. The next book is called Defending Jacob, and I know that this book was turned into a series. I think it was on Apple TV Plus. I read the book a few years ago, and I watched the series maybe last year, not long after it came out. And the series is good. I'm not going to lie, it was good, but it was nowhere near as good as the book. I know that's a common mantra that movies and TV shows are never as good as the book, but this one definitely is not. I sometimes really like to read books about moral dilemmas. And so that's what this book is. So this book focuses on a family whose son is accused of committing a cold-blooded murder of a classmate. And it really focuses on how the family processes this and tries to determine if their son really did this or not. If you happen to be a parent, you'll find yourself kind of thinking along the way what you would do as Jacob's mother or father. And as things are revealed, you'll wonder how you would handle it as well. The ending of this book has an unbelievable plot twist that will also leave you wondering if maybe you would have done the same thing. So don't want to give too much away, but absolutely a book worth reading. The next book is called Warriors Don't Cry. And this book is about what it was like to be a child who was on the literal front lines of school integration in the South. When I read this book, I have a very admittedly poor American history background, so I'm always trying to find things that are going to help me understand my country's history a little bit better. And when I read this book, there were times I thought to myself, this is like a caricature of what racism in America must have been like. And then I had to remind myself it's not a caricature, that this was actually true. This is actually part of our country's history. And it was difficult to read, but an important read. So that is another book I recommend, especially if you are an educator. Another book that I love to recommend to people, this is actually, technically it's a YA book, but it's actually probably one of the most mature and disturbing books I've ever read. So the book is called Unwind, and it takes place in a dystopian future after our country had what was called the Heartland War, where it was decided that abortion is completely illegal, but what they decided in place of that is that parents can, when their children turn 16, if they decide after 16 years of being with this child that they really do not want to raise this child anymore, they can have him or her unwound. And what they do is they live in what's called a divided state. Now, I don't want to give too much away about unwinding, so I'm not going to go into detail about it. But the book focuses on a number of children who are all scheduled to be unwound for different reasons, and how they deal with understanding what their fate is going to be. You will actually get to experience a character who gets unwound in the novel, and everybody who I've talked to who has read this book, when they said that they read that scene, it's something that they will never in their lives forget. So if you're looking for a book that's going to probably stay with you forever, this is probably the book. It's actually a series. I've read the other books in the series. They're good. none of them touch this one. So if you decide to read the series, you can, but if you don't want to read the whole series, just read the first book, this one, and that'll be enough for you. The book Room. I know this was also turned into a movie. The movie was good. Again, not as good as the book. What I found particularly interesting about this book is that it is written in the voice of a 5-year-old boy who is being held captive with his own mother. You'll find yourself absolutely empathizing with him and wondering what the future holds for him as he shares his experience being with his mother. A really emotionally involving book. So that's another one I recommend. I appreciate the fact that it's written from a very unique perspective, from the point of view of a 5-year-old boy. See, was that my next one? Yep, the next one is 13 Reasons Why. A lot of people are aware of this book because they know of the series that was on Netflix. It's obviously, the series caused quite a bit of controversy. And probably not unwarranted, but the book is a bit on the controversial side as well. It's technically a young adult book. A lot of people find it to be too mature for a lot of teens, and it might be, but it's a very candid look at things like sexual abuse and harassment and bullying and suicide, all unfortunately topics that we know teens have to face and deal with. It's a pretty raw accounting, but it will definitely leave you thinking about how we treat other people and the messages that we send about suicide and sexual harassment. So again, another tough story to read, but definitely one that's going to be thought-provoking and generate quite a bit of conversation with people who have read it. Revolutionary Road also turned into a movie a few years ago. What I really like about this book is that as a married person, it made me really think about my own marriage. It's a pretty intense look at what marriage is and what can make or break a marriage. Even though it's set in the 50s, it still is something that anybody who's married can probably identify with, to kind of take a look at your average typical marriage and then start to think about what things is this couple going through that we might be going through as well, and try to find ways to prevent anything from harming your own marriage. The Virgin Suicides, pardon me, is a book I read a number of years ago. I know this was also turned into a movie. I've actually never seen the movie, maybe because I just love this book so much. I'm terrified if I watch the movie, it'll be bad, and I don't want it. I don't want it to be ruined for me. So a lot of these books are downers. I'm sorry. I guess I'm into downer type books. So this book focuses on one family after their youngest daughter, Cecilia, attempts suicide, and how the family goes into this horrible downward spiral. It's actually told in flashback, again, by an interesting narrator. It is a first-person plural narrator, where it is a group of boys who knew the Lisbon family and all of their 5 daughters when they were kids, and they reflect back on what happened with that family after Cecilia attempted suicide. So it's a pretty dark book, but it's, again, got an interesting narrator, and it's an interesting look at how suicide can affect a family. 19 Minutes is written by the very popular author Jodi Picoult, and I see my time is up already. So this is a school shooting book, and but it's an interesting book because at the time it was the only book written where the school shooter survived. So if you want to take a look at how this impacts a family, it's an interesting book. And I'm not going to get to talk about any of these other books here. I'm so depressed. I talked over my time. I am so sorry. But I know you guys want to get to your next session. So I'm going to let you get to the next session and you can look at the spreadsheet and see if there are any other books. I'm so sorry I didn't get to share anymore.